Hey everyone, welcome to the conversation. Welcome to a new episode of HR Tech Talks. Glad to have you here today. As you can see on the screen, we're going to be having a conversation with the team over at Workday. I'm really excited to talk to Barbry McGann, and without any further ado, I'm just going to bring her up on screen to have a talk. Hey Barbry, welcome.
Hi Ben, great to be here. Great to see you again.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. It's good to, we haven't seen each other in person in a long time, but it's good to see you and good to have a conversation. So today we're going to talk about some of the latest capabilities in the workforce product. I'm excited to dig into some of those things and why they matter for the HR audience. But before we get too far into that, number one, for those of you listening in out there, please chime in. Tell us where you're listening in from. Post a comment wherever you're listening on YouTube or on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you. If you've got questions for Barbry as we go through today in the conversation, feel free to, again, pop those in. We'll try to get to them as we go through the conversation. Barbry, give everybody a little bit of insight on who you are and what you do, just to kick us off.
Sure. So I'm Barbry McGann, as Ben said, and I am Executive Director of the Office of the CHRO for Workday. I've been at Workday over 5 years and many different roles, from product management to now a new role that we call solution marketing, really designed to bring solutions with outcomes to our customers that include products and services together. And outside of work, I'm an avid runner, so I love to do anything outside. I'm located in California, so it's a little tough these days with the fires, but the outlook is looking good for the end of this week. I'll be back out there and running again.
Fingers crossed as you can get out there and do a good run. I've hinted at it a couple of times in the last couple of months, but I've been nursing this knee injury, and finally yesterday got out for a 3-mile run and walk, and it was the most glorious moment in like 6 months. And so like, do a mile for me whenever you do get out there, and stay safe with all the fires and everything else going on. Goodness.
Will do. Promise you, Ben.
All right, so let's get into kind of the topic for the discussion today. There was a new announcement that just came out recently about some new capabilities in the Workforce HCM product around DEI, around diversity, equity, inclusion. And I'd love to dig into that with you today and talk about what those are, why that matters in a bigger context a little bit, because I think there's some opportunity there to dig into that and why now is the right time. So why don't you just kind of start that discussion off, lay that out there a little bit for us, what some of those announcements were, I guess, what some of those capabilities are, and we'll go from there.
That sounds great, Ben. You know, as you know, I like to call the Office of the CHRO the Office of the Crisis Officer, right? Because not only did we have the pandemic, the health crisis, but we've also had the economic crisis and now the social crisis. And so I've been really fortunate to work with not only the amazing customer community that we have at Workday, but with our practitioners. And in particular, we have an amazing Chief Diversity Officer. Her name is Karen Taylor. And she came to Workday about 4.5 years ago. And what she realized is that we've all had really good intentions of what we want to do with our diversity programs, right? Increasing representation, and really focused on getting, higher numbers and diverse representation into organizations. But that just wasn't enough, right? We can get people in the door, but if you don't care about how you treat those people once they're in the door, if you don't create an inclusive environment, one that cultivates belonging, one that offers equal opportunity, they're not going to stay. You often hear people talk about it as a leaky bucket syndrome, right? Because you can get them in, but you can't keep them. So Karen saw that, and when she came to Workday, she came with a new approach, and she calls it the VIBE approach. And what VIBE stands for is value, inclusion, belonging, and equity for all. And with that approach, she really set out, how do we solve that? How do we go beyond just setting goals for diversity and inclusion to getting those goals and really achieving real outcomes? So with that approach, we've came up with 2 new solutions that we announced to the market. One is VIBE Central, which all of our HCM customers have access to today and is available to them to really get started on the diversity and belonging journey, and allows them to not only understand where they are from a diverse representation across their organization, but to actually set goals, set targets, and then drive towards outcomes. And then the second offering is called the VIBE Index. And the VIBE Index was really designed to help us get to that goal getting. So not just goal setting, but how do you get those goals by driving actionable and accountable analytics? And so the VIBE Index, which is different than most indices out there available in the market and analytics available in the market, is that it really looks at outcomes across not only diversity, but inclusion, belonging, and equity. And it looks at 5 outcomes. So it looks at how you're hiring. Are you hiring diverse representation across the hiring cycle? It looks at leadership and promotion. It looks at the employee experience and belonging. And it looks at attrition. What's also unique about the Vibe Index is it looks at intersectionality. So this is a term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw back in 1989 that talks about how the different dimensions of a person's identity, such as gender and race, can be disability and other factors, really impact your experience. And so not only looking at those outcomes, but looking at those outcomes in those intersections. And then looking at it to make sure that there's parity for all intersections. So how I'm feeling is, a female Caucasian is the same for a female Asian or a male unrepresented minority. So that was really kind of the 2 new offerings, the Vibe Index and Vibe Central.
So I'm going to throw the ball back at you a little bit because we, for a long time, my background, you've been around the space for a while. My background is in HR. And for a long time, we've measured things around diversity, right? We've measured headcount and those kinds of things, but never so much with a focus on actual action. That's what excited me about the announcement was that the shift is towards, it's not just about let's measure it over there and just check the box that we're measuring, but how do we make some actions out of this? So not just goal setting, but goal getting, as you said. How do we actually measure something like belonging and equity versus just saying, well, we're measuring diversity and it turns into a headcount number? What are some of the ways that companies can do that, or some use cases for actually applying that?
Absolutely. So for belonging, one of the key measures that we use at Workday and customers are using is employee sentiment surveys. So really getting the employee's perspective and then being able to look at that data again through intersections. So if you look at employee sentiment about how they're feeling just as female versus male, you'll get very different results and drivers than if you look at it as female Asian or male Asian. And so I think one of the issues at getting at diversity and what's causing outcomes not to be achieved is really not understanding the drivers behind the outcomes. So one of the key things to taking action is really understanding what are the drivers, the leading indicators that are causing those outcomes so that you can put together the corrective actions to actually make those outcomes achieved. And we found that, for example, one of the top reasons that people leave companies is either a bad manager or they're not seeing career progression. But when we started to look at that data, not just from female or male, but when we started looking at the intersections, we found that for female Asians, for example, the number one issue is a bad manager. Whereas for female unrepresented minorities, it was career progression. So the actions you want to take based on those different experiences are going to be different by looking at those intersections. So that's really important, is making sure that truly understand why the outcome isn't happening, and then have the ability through the technology to drive that systematic action to get to those outcomes.
I love that example of looking at it through that lens, because when companies often lay out their numbers on attrition, on turnover, right? It's, hey, we turned over X% of our workforce, but that's it. They don't go any deeper than that, so they don't see that underlying layer that might highlight some of this you're talking about, right? It might turn out that in general, it might be overall that we're lacking learning, or we lack development opportunities. But when you dig into the beyond that surface layer, you realize, hey, wait a minute, every one of our minority employees who's left have left, and they all attribute it back to a manager, or some significant portion of that. And then you start to realize how critical that is. You might be even making decisions about where to invest for the coming year. Let's invest in training because that's the gap. When training won't solve that problem, or how much money you put into it, it won't solve that problem on a broader scale to make life better, to make it more of an inclusive environment for those employees who are not feeling heard in general.
Ben, you nailed it. That's exactly what we found. And that's why we put the Vibe Index together, because we had the ability to set targets. We had the ability to look at our outcomes, but it was really, how do we drive those outcomes? And how do we make sure that we understand all the different dimensions and intersections so that we can put the right programs into place? And then how do we help our customers do the same thing? So you just absolutely nailed it.
What about, going back to Vibe Central, because you talked about that first, kind of at the place where all this information lives. What I was going to say, I've seen a lot of different survey tools, things like that, and the struggle I always have with that is all of your employee data lives over here, and you can do a survey, but it's hard to connect those dots. So it's exciting to hear that it's all in one place. So when you respond, I know who you are. I know
Exactly.
I know what groups you represent, things like that. So I can make some not just to know who you are to know, right? Not in the creepy I know who you are way, but in the way of
Yeah.
that way we can help you. I can't help you if I don't know who you are. If it's an anonymous survey, or if we don't have clear data and it's not accurate, or if someone doesn't feel comfortable telling me, then I can't help them solve their problem, no matter how bad it is. So I love that piece of it, that it lives there. But one of the questions I want to ask you is, Vibe Central, is this a place where you see HR is taking this data and then reporting up on it? Someone, a chief diversity officer, is reporting up on it. Is this a conversation that, like, hey, the CEO needs to be on this? Because I see a lot of CEOs saying, hey, we believe in this, we want to support this. And I'm curious how you see that relationship playing into this. Is this going to be, hey, we're bringing our data from Vibe Central for this conversation to guide this and to help us understand where we are? I'm just kind of curious where you see that going in terms of leading to those kind of interactions on a leadership level.
Yeah, you hit a couple key things. So definitely it's built for people leaders, and it's built to give them one place that they can go to across the entire talent lifecycle. So they can see in hiring, they can see in promotion, they can see in leadership, and they can also see from the employee's experience how well they're doing across different diversity demographic dimensions. One of the things that we really invested in early on with Karen Taylor coming to Workday 4.5 years ago is how do we create that robust data model, right? So that you can capture the different dimensions and have people self-report the different dimensions about themselves, so they can bring their whole selves to Workday. So we do cover a broad spectrum of diversity demographic data. This is probably one of the best kept secrets at Workday, that hopefully it's not going to be a secret anymore, where we support up to 65 gender codes, if you like. We support the ability to report your own political affiliation if you want, your sexual orientation, your disability status. So we've got a really robust data model. We also respect the right of individuals to make information private or public. And then through the Vibe Central, these are centralized reports that then provide the ability for organizations not only to see where they are across the diverse representation, but to set targets. So what's really important is, how am I doing against the targets I'm setting? Am I achieving them? As well as we include benchmarks as a service in there, so they can not only see how they're doing against their own targets, but how are you doing in comparison to your peers in creating a diverse hiring talent pool? How are you doing against promotions for females, and also by race? So really kind of bringing that information to one central place. And then what you said is really key, because it's in there with our transactional system, our talent acquisition systems, our talent management systems, and also our employee experience systems. We can use those dimensions to automate actions, right? And help drive those outcomes. So for example, in our employee sentiment survey, where we have a belonging index, where we can measure how are different intersections feeling about their sense of belonging at Workday. And we can see for different intersections, some of their employee experiences lower than others. That allows us then to craft and curate very specific journeys, very specific actions, and help the people leaders of those people to drive better experiences across the board. And because we have that data and the insights in with the ability to take action, it's very powerful to drive to those outcomes.
That excites me on so many levels. Right, we're talking on the macro level, the company level, but a minute ago you pointed out that the data that you have shows that one of the things that might indicate someone's not going to stick around is a poor manager relationship. And so, yes, this helps on the macro level, but it also points out those drivers at a micro level to find out, hey, in this department, this team, this geography, whatever area you want to cut that by, we find out that this group of people is not having a good relationship with their leader. And so it helps us to target that, support those leaders. Actually, have seen some data that says, sorry, trying to make sure I have the number right, 70% of someone's satisfaction at work depends not on the cool perks and the benefits and the pay and everything else that HR is in charge of, but actually that relationship with their direct leader. So if we don't get that right, if we don't solve that piece of the puzzle, then there's no amount of things we can provide that's going to rectify that. It's going to make that a good experience. And we can't solve for a bad experience on the manager side with other kinds of things. You can't fill that gap.
Absolutely. And with that data, we can then start to put together special training, special oversight, and programs around that manager to make them a better manager. And then we can continuously measure, are we seeing improvements there? The other key thing like that is when we drove into those different dimensions, we're finding different causes. And so we can start to tailor programs to address if in one area, say it's female Asians are feeling lack of career progression, and that's the number one reason that they're attriting, we can put specific programs to promote and do talent development of that particular group. Versus if we're seeing underrepresented males, minorities, or for males are having bad experiences with managers, then we can focus on a program to fix the managers of those groups. So we can really tailor the programs based on where we see the drivers pointing us or where the leading indicators are showing that we're not able to achieve those outcomes. So having that dimensionality, being able to look at diversity, inclusion, belonging, and equity in multiple dimensions has really been a game changer for us.
You struck a nerve a little bit ago with the comment on the manager piece too, by the way, highlighting that as an issue, because Mary, JD, several people in the comments here thank you everybody for chiming in, by the way. I'm keeping an eye on all these. JD and Mary and several of the others were saying like that bad manager thing is really hard to overcome. It is a really tough one, and that we definitely need some targeted interventions. But as we were pointing out earlier, it's hard to take action if you don't know where to take action. And that kind of peanut butter spread approach, we know that doesn't work broadly. That doesn't lead to better outcomes. The managers that are good at it, they get turned off when you tell them they need to get better at something they're already doing well. The ones that aren't doing very well, they're like, oh, that must be somebody else. And so no one feels that accountability. So being able to target and highlight and work with those leaders that really need it, the critical opportunity. One of the things you said earlier that can I ask you to dig into a little bit more, if you don't mind, was the benchmarks piece, because that's one of the challenges that when I'm talking to HR leaders, one of the first things they always say is, hey, who else has solved this? Who else is doing this? What is everybody else doing? Because we always want to feel like we're not in it alone. We always want to feel like someone else. Obviously, if someone else has already solved it, has climbed the mountain, and they can tell me the path to go, so much the better. But at least if someone else is struggling with the same kind of things, if I know where I am in relation to them, that feels more comfortable than just having no clue whatsoever. So the benchmarks piece of there, I would imagine that's going to add some comfort, but also some guidance. Will you talk a little more about what that looks like, maybe what that experience is?
Absolutely. So as part of our subscription offering, everyone is entitled to use the benchmarks data as a service. It is a play to get. So you have to volunteer your data in order to get the data back. But we did include that. We thought that was really important. When you look at Vibe Central, we brought all the diversity and inclusion information into one place. We can look across the entire talent lifecycle. We thought it'd be really important to provide, where you stand, and you can set whether you want to do the median of the benchmark. So we picked the median, the 50th percentile, to create a target bar. So not only can you see yourself against where you're setting your targets, but also where the leaders are, or the median percentile of your peers are in the same industry. So the benchmark will automatically bring in, if you've opted into our benchmarking as a service, the median of what your peers are doing, so that you can kind of see, am I at the median? Am I above the median? Am I below the median? So that's really, really helpful. The other thing that we're trying to do is help you if you're seeing this outcome. So maybe it's below the median of what you want to achieve in hiring, or in hiring is a great example. Where is it happening? Why aren't you receiving the diverse outcomes? Is it happening at the top of the funnel, meaning maybe you're not sourcing your screening interviews to conversion is low? Or is it in the middle of the funnel, meaning maybe there's an issue with the interview team? Or is it in the bottom of the funnel? Could it be the hiring manager? So really helping you figure out not only why you're not hitting your target, but where it's occurring, so that you can take the right actions and know where to look to improve those outcomes. So the drivers tied to those outcomes are really, really important.
Yes. So it all comes down to big picture. Ask any CEO, they'll say they believe in this. They'll say that they support this. But when it comes down to actually knowing where to target, where to support, where to place that help, that's when that breaks down for a lot of companies. So that It's so exciting to see, like, this goes beyond just saying that we want to help, to helping us decide where to act. It's really closing that gap, and that's what's really interesting. the example you just given on the hiring funnel, for example, I'm thinking you mentioned the leaky bucket earlier, and that's
Yeah.
a great way of putting it. One of the areas of research that we've done at Lighthouse in the last year or two is around internal ability, growing leaders from within, hiring from within. And one of the challenges people bring up is that sounds great, but what if we don't have a diverse group of people inside? So the problem is a lot of companies will they'll do some sort of job, and some good, some not so good, on trying to be diverse in their hiring efforts.
Yep.
But then if you don't ever grow those diverse leaders inside the business, they're going to realize, as you mentioned the example earlier, right? They're going to realize there's nothing here for me, and they're going to check out. Whether that's driven by manager interaction or driven by a lack of growth opportunities, they're going to check out and leave. And so you'll never have a diverse representation at the higher levels of leadership because you're not prioritizing that leaky bucket thing keeps coming back to me. I'm envisioning that. But that's a critical piece of this. And again, until now, it's really hard to figure out where those leaders are. How do we tap into them? Who's showing signs of that? Because it might be in truly different places, and you don't have one source of truth for how to take that next step.
Yeah, that's so key. People spend a lot of effort, a lot of time on talent acquisition, getting that diverse representation, and they stop. But that's the problem, right? That's where the leaky bucket comes in. They need to put as much, even more, on once they get that diverse representation in the door, and how you develop them, how you promote them, how you give them opportunities for stretch assignments to grow. And that's where you see now the market moving. So leaders that have successful diversity programs have really focused in on inclusion, belonging as well. And that's why we're trying to make the conversation not just about diversity. That's a really important start. Get that diverse representation in the door. And we still need to do a much better job on that. We haven't achieved all of our goals there. But it's really, once they're in the door, making sure you provide those opportunities to really grow. And one of the things that we're excited about is our talent marketplace. So one of the abilities in the talent marketplace, and we see this as a new way of doing succession planning. Instead of your tops down, who do you know, to create your succession list, why not use talent marketplace, machine learning, skills-based matching to figure out who are the best candidates, who match by skills, to really drive your talent mobility and to provide those stretch assignments and those goals. So again, really focusing in on, once they're in the door, how do you keep that amazing talent with you and stop the leaky bucket?
Absolutely. Excellent. Goodness, this is so much fun. We could talk about this for a very long time, but I want to be respectful of your time. If someone is curious about this, wants to know more about what you and the team are up to on the HCM side over at Workday, what's the best way for someone to learn more or get in touch?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got so many venues to help you. So of course we have our own diversity and belonging website on workday.com that you can come to, and you can see our full solution available there. We are having a webinar this Thursday with Greg Pryor and also Phil Wilburn to get into the details of Vibe Central and Vibe Index in depth. So I encourage everyone to attend there, and that's posted on our website, and I can send that by. And of course, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. And soon we'll be publishing an ebook that will provide out to everyone on the Vibe approach and best practices, and then how you can use the system to be able to deliver on it.
Shout outs to two people really quick at the Workday team. Greg is amazing. He is phenomenal. Had a chance to speak with him at HR Tech a couple years ago on a panel, and I was over there, I was on the panel with him and making notes of everything he's saying because he's brilliant. But also you mentioned Karen Taylor.
Karen Taylor, she is absolutely fantastic. She's our Chief Diversity Officer, and we wouldn't be where we are today. We wouldn't have the Vibe Index or Vibe Central if it wasn't for the amazing brilliance of Karen Taylor. And she's such an inspiration to work with.
Yes. So she's written some things on the blog that I read that were tremendous. So I'm now following her. I'm a fan of hers, after not just because of the work she's done with the product, but just because she's incredibly sharp. And the same kind of thing I told you before we started recording, right? She's one of those people you go into a meeting with and you walk away like, God, I'm smarter now because I had a conversation with her. So she's
absolutely
tremendous.
There's one more we should call out, and his name is Phil Wilburn. I don't know if you've had a chance to meet with him.
Yeah.
He is the man behind the analytics. So he's the one who really put together what I call the secret sauce in the index, being able to look at the intersections and the parity. So he's another, and he'll be on the webinar on Thursday as well.
Okay, wonderful.
So I've got the best job in the world, Ben, because not only do I get to work with people like you, but our amazing customer community and our practitioners, such as Karen Taylor, Phil, and Greg, which is just an amazing time to come to work and work with such wonderful people.
Wonderful. Well, before I start blushing, we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much for the kind words, for your time, Barbry. You've been tremendous, and I appreciate you.
All right. Stay safe.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. You too.
All right.
Everybody else.
Good luck with homeschooling.
Hey, goodness. Fingers crossed here. Fingers crossed. Let's try to make it happen. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us in the conversation. Appreciate you for sticking around with us for the discussion. We will catch you next time on HR Tech Talks.